Thom Hartmann here on the news. You need to know this. President Obama has a new strategy to kickstart the economy, and this one does not need the approval of Republicans in Congress. Beginning this week, the president will unveil one new executive order each week to do things like help struggling homeowners renegotiate their mortgages, help students pay back student loans, which have now topped over $1 trillion for the first time ever, and put returning veterans back to work. The We Can't Wait campaign, as it's being called by the White House, stresses that the economic problems facing this nation need urgent attention, and that we can't wait for solutions to come out of a deadlocked Congress full of Republicans whose election strategy is to make the economy worse. Unfortunately, executive orders normally don't carry as much punch as actual legislation from Congress, but they can still produce some economic benefits. That stands in stark contrast to the Republicans' plan that, according to Moody's, will likely push the economy back into a worse recession. The Occupy Wall Street movement was targeted with terrorism over the weekend. Early Saturday morning, police responded to the Occupy main encampment, filled with about 36 demonstrators, after an explosion was reported in the occupation's kitchen area. An unidentified individual threw a homemade chemical bomb into the area at around 4 a.m., causing an explosion. Luckily, no one was injured, but according to police, the Gatorade container filled with chemicals could have caused serious harm. As Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, then you win. We've reached that then they fight you stage in the Occupy Wall Street movement. Let's see if Fox so-called News picks up the story and runs with it, or if they only report on acts of Islamic terrorism. In the best of the rest of the news, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is turning up the heat on filibustering Republicans. Not to be deterred by a unified filibuster of President Obama's American Jobs Act 2 weeks ago, followed by another unified filibuster last week of just a single provision in the Jobs Act, Harry Reid will force another vote in the coming weeks on a jobs bill and dare Republicans to filibuster it again. This legislation will fund $50 billion worth of infrastructure repairs and construction to rebuild deteriorating roads, crumbling bridges, decaying railroads. According to Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, it will put hundreds of thousands of Americans back to work immediately. And the legislation is completely paid for with a 0.7% surtax on people who make more than $1 million a year. So we'll see if Republicans, for a third week, will continue their agenda to crash the economy and side with the billionaires and the 1%, or will actually do something to turn this economy around and help millions of Americans who just want to get back to work. I'm not holding my breath. The Super Committee Gang of 12 is officially up for sale. Politico is reporting that over 200 corporations and special interest groups are lobbying the members of the Gang of 12 who are working out a way to cut about $1.5 trillion out of the deficit. Leading the way in the lobbying onslaught is the healthcare industry, followed closely by the defense industry that could take a huge hit if a deal isn't reached and automatic triggers are pulled that cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of the Pentagon's budget. The energy industry is also spending money hoping to protect its billions in taxpayer oil subsidies. So if we do get a deal out of the new government by gang, then expect it to be the best deal money can buy. If you try to register new voters in Florida, you could be slapped with thousands of dollars in fines, as one high school teacher found out the hard way. A new law pushed by Republicans that took effect in the Sunshine State back in July places a slew of burdens on people or groups who register new voters, requiring them to submit paperwork to the state first and then abide by strict new guidelines on how quickly the voter registration forms have to be returned to the state. The law is so radical that the League of Women Voters has suspended its voter registration drive in Florida out of fear that they could be fined too, like high school's teacher Jill Cicerelli, who just wanted to make sure students at her school can engage in our nation's democracy. The ACLU is challenging the law as unconstitutional, so while Republicans across the country pass stricter voter ID laws to make it harder for people to vote, in Florida they're also passing laws to make it harder to register people to vote. Bottom line is that Republicans realize the only way they can win elections is if they can keep poor people, young people, elderly people, working people away from the polls, thus their efforts to criminalize voter registration. From voter suppression to voter empowerment, Tunisia, the nation that kicked off the Arab Spring, took the next step forward as millions voted over the weekend to elect that nation's first democratic government in its history. Fingertips dyed blue, Tunisians rejoiced over their newfound self-governance. outside peaceful polling stations across the country. This is an example of a democratic revolution in the Arab world not triggered by a U.S. military invasion, but instead triggered by inspired people, many of whom likely listened to President Obama's 2009 speech in Cairo when he told Arab people to tear down their dictators. Bush started wars based on lies, and the world rightly condemned us. Obama gave a speech, and the Arab Spring blossomed. Crazy alert, Rick Perry's gone birther. Either he's looking to capture the birther vote, or he was just enamored after a meeting with the Donald. But struggling presidential candidate Rick Perry went birther over the weekend in an interview with Parade magazine. When asked whether or not he believed that the president was born in the United States, Perry said he didn't have a definitive answer. Then asked if the birth certificate from President Obama was real. He responded by saying Donald Trump doesn't think it's real, and he personally doesn't have any idea. So much for that. Orly Tates is endorsing him, actually, really. And that's the way it is today, Monday, October 24th, 2011. I'm Thom Hartmann on the news.